Appalachia's Deadliest, the macabre saga of the Siamese Adair Brothers. Before we dive into this dark story, tell me quick in the comments, which city are you watching from today? New York, Los Angeles, London, Sydney? The winter of 1895 came early to Black Hollow, West Virginia, bringing with it the kind of cold that seeped through clapboard walls and settled deep into miners' lungs. The town wasn't much more than a cluster of company houses huddled around the Consolidated Coal Company's main shaft, but it had a midwife, Martha Keene, who'd delivered every baby born in Black Hollow for the past 20 years. She'd seen difficult births before, breech babies, stillborns, twins that came too early, twins, but nothing had prepared her for what emerged from Sarah Adair's body that December night. 2 boys, fused at the torso, sharing skin and blood vessels in a band of flesh that connected them from sternum to navel. Elias came first, his right side pressed against his brother's left. Then Ezra, larger and louder, his first cry echoing through the cramped company house while his twin remained eerily silent. The midwife worked quickly, tying off the umbilical cord, singular, feeding both bodies, and cleaning the conjoined infants with hands that trembled despite her experience. "They won't survive the night," she told Samuel Adair, the boy's father, a coal-faced man who smelled perpetually of sulfur and sweat. Conjoined twins, they never do. But Samuel was a miner, accustomed to defying odds in darkness, 300 feet below the earth. "They're Adairs," he said simply. "They'll fight." The boys did fight, against infection, against the brutal Appalachian winter, against the stares and whispers of neighbors who crossed themselves when the twins were carried past. By their first birthday, it became clear that Elias and Ezra weren't just surviving. They were adapting in ways that defied medical understanding of the era. Elias controlled their right arm with precision, his fingers nimble and gentle. Ezra commanded the left with brute strength, his grip capable of crushing a walnut by age 3. They learned to walk in perfect synchronization, Elias's intellectual planning balanced by Ezra's physical power. When one ate, both were nourished through their shared blood supply. When one slept, the other kept watch, creating a consciousness that never fully rested. Black Hollow treated them as curiosities at first, then with the casual cruelty that poverty breeds. The other children threw rocks and called them the two-headed devil. Store clerks overcharged Sarah Adair for goods, knowing she had nowhere else to shop in the company town where everything, housing, food, medical care, belonged to Consolidated Coal. Samuel tried to shield his sons, working double shifts to afford the extra fabric Sarah needed to sew special shirts that accommodated their joined bodies. But mining in West Virginia in the early 1900s was the most dangerous occupation in America, with death rates that exceeded even soldiers in combat. Between 1890 and 1912, West Virginia mines killed more workers per capita than any other state. Their bodies crushed by rockfalls, poisoned by gas, or incinerated in explosions that turned coal seams into crematoriums. Samuel Adair became a statistic on April 14, 1907, when a methane pocket ignited in the number 3 shaft. The explosion killed 17 men instantly, trapping another 33 behind collapsed timbers. Samuel was among those buried alive, his lamp extinguishing as oxygen fled the chamber, leaving him to die in the absolute darkness he'd spent his adult life navigating. The boys were 12 years old when they stood beside their mother at the mass funeral, watching 17 coffins lowered into Appalachian clay. The Consolidated Coal Company provided each widow with $50 and eviction notices from company housing. Sarah had 2 weeks to vacate. She moved the twins into a one-room shack on the outskirts of Black Hollow, beyond company land, where squatters and the desperately poor carved existence from rocky soil unsuited for anything but suffering. She took in laundry, charging pennies to wash the coal-stained clothes of miners who pitied her enough to provide work, but not enough to pay fairly. Elias spent those years reading every discarded book he could find, medical texts left behind by the company doctor, anatomy diagrams torn from magazines, veterinary manuals stolen from the company stable. His mind absorbed information with photographic precision, memorizing the location of every artery, the function of every organ, the mechanics of life and death. Ezra spent those same years working at the company slaughterhouse, the only employer willing to hire conjoined twins who couldn't fit into mine shafts or factory machinery. He learned to wield butcher's tools with his powerful left hand, cleavers that could split beef femurs, hooks that could suspend 200 pounds of carcass, knives sharp enough to separate skin from muscle in single clean strokes. They were 18 when Sarah died of pneumonia, her lungs destroyed by years of breathing lye fumes from laundry soap. The company doctor refused to treat her. She couldn't pay, and charity medicine didn't exist in company towns where everything had a price. The twins buried her in the paupers section of Black Hollow Cemetery, using a pine box Ezra built with his butcher's hands, and Elias sealed with pitch stolen from the mine's maintenance shed. They stood over her grave in January 1913, two young men permanently fused together, orphaned twice by an economic system that valued coal over people and profits over lives. "We're alone now," Elias said quietly, his intellectual voice soft against the winter wind. "We've always been alone," Ezra replied, his rougher tone carrying an edge that hadn't existed before their mother's death. Everyone else just pretended to care. They walked back to their shack through snow that had turned gray from coal dust, two minds in partially shared bodies carrying grief and rage in equal measure. The slaughterhouse where Ezra worked sat dark against the hillside. The company store where they'd been cheated 1,000 times glowed with electric lights powered by the labor of dead miners, and in their shack, surrounded by Elias's stolen medical books and Ezra's butcher tools, the Adair brothers began planning a future that didn't involve being victims anymore. They had learned anatomy, human and animal. They had learned the economics of a system that ground people into coal dust. And they had learned, most importantly, that in Black Hollow, West Virginia, missing miners were just another cost of doing business. No one would notice a few more. The autumn of 1923 brought early darkness to Black Hollow, the sun disappearing behind Windrock Mountain by 4 o'clock, leaving the company houses wrapped in coal dust twilight. Elias Adair sat at their rough-hewn table, a stolen medical journal open before him, his right hand tracing diagrams of the human circulatory system. The single kerosene lamp cast long shadows across pages stained with slaughterhouse blood Ezra hadn't fully washed from his left arm. "Another collapse at Shaft 7, Ezra said, hanging his meat hooks on pegs by the door. His voice carried the exhaustion of 10-hour shifts swinging a cleaver through frozen beef haunches. 14 dead. Company stores already posting the death notices. They'll have new scabs from Matewan by Monday." Elias didn't look up from his reading. "They're not using the bodies for medical research?" Ezra snorted, pulling off his blood-crusted apron. "Company doctor took the best ones, 2 strong backs for dissection practice. Rest went straight to the pit. No records, no families asking questions, just like always." The twins had perfected their routine over the past year. Ezra's slaughterhouse position gave him access to company movements, shaft inspections, accident reports, dynamite placements. Elias analyzed the patterns, identifying moments when entire crews would be underground during controlled blasts that could plausibly bury evidence forever. Tonight marked their transition from scavengers to hunters. "There's a night shift starting at 11, Elias said, closing the journal. "Foreman Jenkins, drunk half the time, beats his wife regular. Lives alone in the old foreman's cottage by Shaft 9. No one will miss him until morning roll call." Ezra understood immediately. Jenkins represented everything they hated about Black Hollow, the petty tyrants who enforced company rules while living better than the men whose lives they controlled. Jenkins had once refused Sarah Adair credit at the company store, watching her carry laundry baskets home in the rain rather than extend her a dime. "He's perfect," Ezra said, a rare smile crossing his face. "How do we do it?" Elias explained his plan with surgical precision, using their scarred dinner table as an anatomy chart. Jenkins would be walking home from the company saloon, 300 yards through the slag heap where mine waste created permanent darkness even at midday. Ezra's left arm would deliver the initial incapacitation, a chokehold from behind, using the shared strength of their conjoined torso. Elias's right hand would administer chloroform from a bottle he'd been compounding for weeks, the sweet chemical smell masking their presence. They dragged Jenkins to the slaughterhouse cold room, Ezra's domain after hours when the night watchman played cards in the company office. There, under electric lights powered by the same coal Jenkins had helped extract from dying men's lungs, they'd make the first deliberate cut. "You're sure about the chloroform?" Ezra asked, practical concerns outweighing his brother's theoretical brilliance. "I've tested it on dogs from the company yard," Elias replied calmly. Dosage is 8 milliliters per 70 pounds. Jenkins is 180, 25 milliliters. He'll be unconscious in 90 seconds. The planning soothed them both, transforming anxiety into procedure. For 10 years they'd endured Black Hollow's cruelty, the butcher who refused Ezra service, the schoolmaster who barred them from class, the preacher who called them unnatural from the pulpit. Now they would take control, one life at a time, until the town learned fear. At 10:45 p.m. they moved through the coal camp shadows. Their conjoined bodies moving with unnatural grace developed over 28 years of shared balance. Elias wore a long coat stolen from the company clinic, concealing scalpels and retractors. Ezra carried a burlap sack containing restraints and their chloroform rag, the bottle carefully padded to prevent breakage. The slag heap waited beyond the last row of company houses, a mountain of shale and refuse that swallowed sound and light. Jenkins stumbled toward them, coal dust turning his spit black as he sang a drunken miner's ballad about lost love and whiskey. He never saw the twins until Ezra's massive left arm locked around his throat from behind. Elias pressed the chloroform rag over Jenkins' face with clinical efficiency. The foreman's eyes bulged in shock, then confusion as he recognized the conjoined faces inches from his own, then unconsciousness as the chemical invaded his bloodstream. 28 seconds, Elias noted, checking his pocket watch. Efficient. They dragged the limp body across shale that cut through their boots, Jenkins' heels carving twin furrows in the dust. The slaughterhouse cold room door creaked open at Ezra's touch. He'd oiled the hinges weeks earlier. Inside, rows of beef carcasses hung from meat hooks, their frozen bulk providing perfect cover. They stripped Jenkins methodically, folding his clothes into a neat pile Elias insisted upon. Reduce his mess, he explained. The foreman's body temperature would provide their first controlled study of live human anatomy, the difference between struggling muscle and post-mortem rigidity. Ezra secured the wrists and ankles with butcher's twine, looping the lines through iron rings bolted into the concrete floor. Elias arranged his instruments on a stainless steel table normally used for quartering steers. Scalpel, forceps, bone saw, retractors, all sterilized with carbolic acid solution. Incision? Ezra asked, professional curiosity overcoming his natural brutality. Yo incision, Elias replied, right hand steady as he made the first cut. Sternum to pubis, then lateral to each shoulder, classic autopsy approach, modified for live tissue. The scalpel parted skin and subcutaneous fat with precision only years of self-taught anatomy could achieve. Jenkins's chest rose and fell in shallow chloroform dreams, unaware that his final shift had become the Adair brothers' first experiment. Blood welled bright and arterial, far more vivid than the slaughterhouse beef Ezra processed daily. Elias worked methodically, his right fingers separating muscle layers while Ezra's left hand suctioned pooling blood with a modified turkey baster. They documented every variation from textbook anatomy, the unusual curvature of Jenkins' liver, the extra arterial branch serving his right kidney. 3 hours later, they closed the torso with coarse butcher's twine, Elias's delicate suturing technique ruined by Ezra's thicker thread. Jenkins would live another 12 hours under heavy sedation, providing data on recovery and stress response before the final dissection. They cleaned the cold room with practiced efficiency. Jenkins' clothes burned in the slaughterhouse incinerator alongside beef trimmings. By 4 a.m., Black Hollow slept unaware that its first deliberate murder victim lay breathing shallowly among frozen steers, wired to a crude galvanometer Elias had built from stolen telegraph wire. Walking home through pre-dawn fog, the twins felt something shift inside their shared body. Not guilt, never guilt, but power. For the first time since birth, they controlled who lived and who became study material. 12 more tonight, Ezra said quietly. Shaft 7 night crew. Elias nodded, his mind already calculating dosage adjustments for multiple subjects. We'll need more chloroform and restraints. Black Hollow's dead would fuel their transformation from victims to architects of retribution. Jenkins was just the beginning. The prototype for the systematic harvest that would make the Adair brothers legends whispered in coal camp kitchens for generations. The company would call them mine accidents. The families would mourn and move on, but the twins knew the truth. Black Hollow belonged to them now, vein by vein, cut by cut. Sheriff Amos Tate had seen death in Black Hollow before. Methane blasts that turned men into cinders, roof falls that crushed skulls like eggshells. black lung that coughed up bloody lace, but never anything like the foreman Jenkins. They found him at 7:15 a.m. in the slaughterhouse cold room, hanging from a meat hook like the steers he used to process. His torso opened in a perfect Y incision from sternum to groin, organs meticulously removed and arranged on the steel table beside him, like specimens in a medical museum. Tate stood in the cold room doorway, his deputy retching into a coal bucket behind him. Jenkins's chest cavity gaped empty except for a single typed label pinned to his sternum. Subject 1, recovery failure. Cause, hypovolemic shock. Adair medical research. The surgical precision was surgical. Clean edges, no saw marks. Stitches that would have done a city doctor proud. "This ain't mine accident," Tate said finally, his voice gravel from 30 years of breathing coal dust. "This is something else." He sent his deputy to summon Doc Hargrove from the company clinic, then walked the 300 yards back to the crime scene at the slag heap. Twin drag marks cut through the shale, precise parallel lines spaced exactly the width of two men's shoulders pressed together. Whatever had taken Jenkins knew exactly where to walk, where shadows hid motion from the company watchman a quarter-mile away. Doc Hargrove arrived 30 minutes later, his black medical bag swinging as he navigated the frozen steers. The company doctor had served Black Hollow for 15 years, treating dynamite burns and silicosis with equal indifference, but even he paled at Jenkins' eviscerated torso. Thoracic and abdominal cavities completely emptied, Hargrove muttered, gloved hands probing the sutured edges. Liver, kidneys, heart, all removed with professional technique. This took hours. Whoever did this had medical training. Tate's jaw tightened. "You got any medics in Black Hollow besides yourself?" Hargrove shook his head. "Just the nurse at the clinic, but she can't suture like this." He hesitated, then added quietly, "There's the Adair boys. Elias reads everything medical he can steal. Could be self-taught, but this quality..." Tate cut him off. "You saying the twins did this? Not accusing? Just observing." Hargrove closed his bag. "But if they did, they're not just dangerous, they're brilliant." By noon, every miner in Black Hollow knew about the foreman on the meat hook. The company superintendent called an emergency meeting in the company store, electric lights buzzing overhead as 200 coal-blackened faces listened to the announcement. Full shift tomorrow, double production quotas, no tolerance for slowdowns. Missing Jenkins would be deducted from the Widows and Orphans Fund. Tate waited until the meeting broke up, then pulled aside the three most reliable miners. Brothers who'd survived the Matewan massacre 2 years earlier, when Baldwin Felt's detectives gunned down 12 Union men in broad daylight. They knew the mountain better than anyone, every ventilation shaft, every dead-end tunnel. "We're hunting tonight," Tate told them in the jailhouse back room, his service revolver cleaned and loaded on the table. "Full sweep of shafts 7 through 12. If the Adairs are in the mountain, we'll flush 'em." The miners exchanged looks. "You sure it's them twins, Sheriff?" Tate tapped the typed label from Jenkins's chest. "Adair Medical Research. Ain't exactly subtle." They moved at midnight, lanterns dimmed to slits, boots muffled with burlap. Windrock Mountain swallowed sound above them, blizzard winds howling through the pines while below ground, the mountain's veins carried echoes of dripping water and shifting shale. Tate led, shotgun ready, the miner brothers fanning out through parallel ventilation shafts that honeycombed the coal seams like ant tunnels. Hour 1 found nothing but rats and stagnant water. Hour 2 revealed Jenkins' missing organs preserved in jars along shaft 9. Liver floating in formaldehyde stolen from the company clinic. Kidneys sliced thin like deli meat. Heart bisected to reveal coronary arteries clogged with years of cornbread and bacon grease. "They're taunting us," growled miner Caleb, who'd lost a brother to the Matewan shooting, leaving specimens like we're on their damn tour. Hour 3 brought the first real sign, fresh drag marks disappearing into a ventilation shaft too narrow for normal men. The twins' conjoined torso, 36 inches across at the shoulder, fit where single men couldn't follow. Tate cursed, wedging his arm into the opening until shale sliced his forearm. "Ezra's butcher work," he said, examining a beef haunch bone saw abandoned in the shaft mouth. "Elias's formaldehyde jars. They're deep in the mountain now." Back at the company store, Tate organized rotating watches at every shaft entrance. The Consolidated Coal Company grumbled about lost production. but authorized Baldwin Felts detectives from Bluefield, rent-a-cops who'd earned their reputation gunning down strikers during the 1921 mine wars. 10 armed men arrived by midnight train, their coal scuttle helmets gleaming under electric lanterns. Tate met their leader, Captain Willard, in the jailhouse. Willard was ex-military, Charleston accent crisp as fresh banknotes. Heard you got medical student serial killers. Conjoined twins. That true? True enough, Tate replied. They're in the mountain. Know every shaft, every dead end. Regular miners can't follow. Willard smiled thinly. We don't need to follow. We flood 'em out. Tate's stomach turned. You mean dynamite the ventilation shafts? Gas first, Willard corrected. Mustard derivative from the war. Non-lethal. They'll come running or choke. Then we pick 'em off at the entrances. Tate pictured Elias's surgical precision, Ezra's butcher strength. Gas might slow them, but cornered animals fought hardest. And if they don't come out? Willard shrugged. Company owns the coal. They can own 2 dead twins, too. By dawn, Black Hollow watched from cabin windows as Baldwin Felts strung gas canisters through the ventilation system. Tate stood at shaft 9, shotgun heavy in frozen hands, knowing the mountain's darkness hid things no gas could flush. The Adairs had spent childhood exploring these tunnels, crawling where adults couldn't, mapping dead ends and charcoal sketches Elias still kept. At 6:47 a.m., the first canister hissed. Yellowish vapor snaked through the shafts, carrying the bitter almond stench of chemical warfare. Miners who'd survived the Great War retched into the snow. Tate waited, breath shallow against his bandana. 10 minutes passed, 20. Then movement at shaft 7, a single lantern bobbing through gas clouds, 2 silhouettes fused at the chest emerging into dawn light. Elias's right arm clutched medical bags bulging with jars. Ezra's left gripped a bone saw slick with fresh blood. Hands up, Tate bellowed, shotgun racked. The twins froze, then bolted left toward the slag heap. Baldwin Felts opened fire, bullets sparking off shale as the conjoined killers vanished into their network of ventilation shafts once more. Tate sprinted after them, boots sliding on ice, but the mountain swallowed his prey again. Back at the slaughterhouse, they found 3 more typed labels pinned to beef carcasses. Subject 2, Miner Caleb. Harvest successful. Cardiac tissue excellent. Subject 3, Miner Jacob. Pulmonary complications from gas exposure. Subject 4, Baldwin Felts detective. First external subject, highly resistant. Tate crushed the labels in his fist. The Adairs weren't just surviving, they were thriving, turning his manhunt into their harvest. Black Hollow's dead fueled their laboratory, every pursuer becoming another specimen jar. The mountain hunt had failed. The twins were deeper now, better armed, more desperate. And Black Hollow had learned its first bitter lesson. Some monsters couldn't be flushed from darkness. They had to be carved out, piece by bloody piece. The blizzard of January 1924 buried Black Hollow under 3 feet of snow, turning ventilation shafts into frozen tombs and manhunt trails into suicide missions. Sheriff Tate called off the mountain searches, but the Adair Brothers' cabin on the town's edge became the only lead left. Captain Willard of the Baldwin Felts detectives demanded a dawn raid. No warrants needed in company towns where Consolidated Coal owned the law, along with the mountain. Tate gathered his 6 remaining deputies and Willard's 10 detectives at the jailhouse at 4 a.m., the air thick with coffee and gun oil. Maps of the Adair shack covered the table, pencil marks showing entry points and potential escape routes through the frozen creek bed behind. Every man carried a lantern, revolver, and shotgun, double loaded with buckshot for close quarters. They're wounded, Willard said, tapping a blood-stained rag found near shaft 7. Ezra took one in the shoulder. Elias is carrying him now. We go in hard. First man through the door shoots center mass, hits both. Tate nodded grimly. He'd seen the specimen labels on the beef carcasses. Miner Caleb, Miner Jacob, even one of Willard's own detectives. 12 confirmed dead now, their organs harvested with the same clinical precision Jenkins had suffered. The typed notes showed progression. Subject 8, improved suturing technique. Vascular anastomosis successful for 14 hours. The Adairs weren't just killing, they were learning, adapting, perfecting. The posse approached the cabin through swirling snow, boots crunching frozen shale. No light showed through the iced windows. Smoke didn't rise from the chimney. Willard kicked in the door at 5:47 a.m., shotgun leveled. The smell hit first, formaldehyde sharp as a slapped face, undercut by rotting meat and coppery blood. Lanterns revealed horrors methodically arranged across the single room. A stainless steel surgical table bolted to the floor, stained dark from repeated use. Walls lined with shelves holding glass jars, livers floating in yellow fluid, hearts bisected to show plaque buildup, lungs inflated like balloons to demonstrate black lung scarring, labels written in Elias's precise handwriting: dynamite loader, strong cardiac tissue, mule skinner, robust musculature, Baldwin Feltzner 4, high pain tolerance. Tate's stomach revolted, but he forced himself to catalog the evidence. 5 complete torsos hung from meat hooks in the corner, skin flayed back to expose rib cages wired open like butterfly collections. Surgical tools gleamed on a side table, scalpels of graduated sizes, bone saws with teeth filed to razor edges, forceps for peeling apart layered muscle. A hand-cranked galvanometer sat beside a car battery stolen from the company garage, jumper cables ending in scalpel blades for electrical stimulation. Willard kicked over a crate, revealing Ezra's contribution: cleavers crusted with dried blood, meat hooks polished bright from use, twine bundles for restraints. A ledger lay open on the table, Elias's meticulous record spanning 6 months. Subject 1, Jenkins, initial live dissection viable for 12 hours, hypovolemic shock terminal. Subject 7, Caleb, improved anesthesia protocol. Subject remained conscious for organ harvest. Christ almighty, muttered Deputy Hargrove, who'd lost his cousin to the Shaft 7 accident. They'd been planning this since their ma died. The final horror waited in the back corner, a massive pine family portrait frame, empty except for a single photograph pinned to the backing. Elias and Ezra, age 12, standing beside their mother's fresh grave. Written beneath in pencil: mother's heart gave out, ours never will. Ian. No twins. No fresh blood trails, just the frozen laboratory of Appalachia's deadliest medical experiment. Tate found their escape route behind the creek, an iron grate covering a forgotten ventilation shaft leading straight into Windrock Mountain's deepest levels. The grate hung open, fresh boot prints vanishing into darkness. A blood smear on the rungs showed Ezra's shoulder wound, but the twins had hours head start. Back at the jailhouse, Tate interviewed neighbors who'd avoided the Adairs for years, but now remembered details. The old woman from the company store claimed Elias bought twice the normal formaldehyde last month. The slaughterhouse foreman admitted Ezra worked double shifts but never seemed tired, likely because Elias read medical journals while his brother swung the cleaver. The Baptist preacher recalled the twins sitting stone-faced through sermons about sin, Elias sketching anatomical diagrams on the hymnal margins. They weren't right after Sarah died, the storekeeper told Tate. Ezra got meaner. Elias got colder, started talking about repayment to Black Hollow for taking their family. Willard wanted to dynamite the ventilation shafts, seal the twins alive in their mountain tomb. Tate refused, haunted by the ledger's progression. Subject 12. Multiple organ harvesting viable. Next phase, composite reconstruction. The Adairs weren't finished. They had a goal: bodies combined, lives rebuilt through surgical violence. Blasting the shafts might preserve Black Hollow short-term but create legends that drew medical curiosity seekers for generations. Instead, Tate posted permanent guards at every shaft mouth, offered $500 reward posters across 3 counties, and sent Hargrove to Charleston for expert consultation. The state medical examiner confirmed Elias's work rivaled Johns Hopkins surgeons. Self-taught genius level. More concerning, continuous improvement curve suggests no learning plateau. Black Hollow transformed overnight. Miners refused night shifts. Company production dropped 40%. Widows burned Adair-related belongings. Children drew twin-headed monsters on schoolhouse walls. Consolidated Coal fired Willard after he lost 3 more detectives to shaft ambushes. Bodies returned to the slaughterhouse with labels. External funding terminated. Independent research continues. Tate sat alone in the cabin that night, lantern casting shadows across specimen jars. He understood the twins better than he cared to admit. Black Hollow had created them. Company greed that killed Samuel Adair, poverty that starved Sarah, prejudice that isolated conjoined children. Elias diagnosed the disease. Ezra provided the cure, but surgery had complications, and Black Hollow's disease ran deeper than two men could cut out. As dawn broke over frozen Windrock Mountain, Tate heard distant hammering from the mountain's heart, metal on stone, echoing through ventilation shafts. The Adairs were digging deeper, building something in darkness no lantern could reach. The cabin raid hadn't ended the nightmare. It had revealed the scale, and the twins were just getting started. Sheriff Amos Tate stood at the mouth of Shaft 12 in late February 1924, blizzard winds tearing at his coal-dusted overcoat as the mountain's ventilation shafts exhaled cold, mineral breath. 2 months had passed since the cabin raid, and Black Hollow teetered on collapse, production down 70%, consolidated coal threatening mass evictions, miners' families packing belongings into mule carts under cover of darkness. The Adair brothers had become the town's death sentence, their legend growing darker with each vanished watchman. Tate's face had hollowed, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights studying Elias's ledger. The twins' notes revealed ambition beyond mere killing. Phase 3, composite reconstruction viable. Subject 15 torso accepts, subject 9 limbs. Vascular rejection minimal. They'd moved beyond individual harvests toward surgical assembly. Human forms rebuilt from multiple donors. A grotesque quest for the family Black Hollow had denied them. The final confrontation came unannounced at 3:17 a.m. March 3rd. Tate's night watch, 4 armed miners led by Deputy Hargrove, patrolled the slag heap perimeter when hammering echoes suddenly intensified from Shaft 9. Lantern light caught twin silhouettes emerging from the ventilation grate, dragging a massive pine crate between them. Elias's right arm clutched surgical bags. Ezra's left gripped a pickaxe crusted with recent blood. "Hargrove! Flank left!" Tate roared, shotgun raised. The twins reacted with inhuman coordination. Ezra swung the pickaxe in a wide arc, shattering Tate's lantern while Elias hurled a chloroform-soaked rag from 20 feet. Hargrove fired wildly, bullet grazing Ezra's already wounded shoulder as the twins dove back into the shaft. The pine crate remained behind, its contents shifting heavily. Tate approached cautiously, deputies covering angles. The crate measured 6 feet long, 3 wide. Carpenter quality, sealed with pitch like the twins' mother's coffin. A typed label on the lid read, "Mother reborn, Adair family complete, do not disturb." Willard, recalled from Bluefield with fresh Baldwin Felts reinforcements, demanded immediate destruction. "Dynamite it. End this now." Tate pried the lid with his shotgun barrel. Inside lay their final horror. Sarah Adair's desiccated corpse, torso replaced with grafted minor muscle, arms from 2 different donors sutured at shoulders, face preserved through Elias's chemical genius, but eyes replaced with glass marbles from the company store. Around her neck hung a locket containing infant photos of the twins. Surgical twine stitches marched across her reconstructed chest, Elias's handwriting tattooed beside them. Heartbeat sustained, 47 minutes. External power source viable. Hargrove vomited into the snow. The other deputies backed away, crossing themselves. Tate forced clinical detachment, noting the crude battery pack wired to Sarah's ribcage, car battery salvaged from the company garage, connected through Elias's telegraph wire galvanometer. The twins hadn't just sought revenge. They'd tried to rebuild their family, one stolen organ at a time. Willard's men dynamited the crate at dawn, the explosion echoing through Windrock Mountain like a death rattle. Black Hollow watched from cabin windows as flames consumed Sarah Adair's patchwork corpse, the chemical stench of burning formaldehyde mixing with coal smoke. But the twins never emerged. Tate organized final sweeps. Every shaft, every ventilation tunnel, every dead-end gallery. Baldwin Felts flooded passages with creek water. Nothing. The hammering stopped. The specimen jars in the cabin gathered dust. Black Hollow's missing dwindled to 0. Consolidated Coal declared victory through press releases, shipping fresh scabs from Kentucky to replace lost workers. Production quotas returned to normal. The company store reopened. Children returned to the schoolhouse, though they avoided the back row where Elias once sketched anatomies. Tate kept 1 specimen jar from the cabin, a miner's heart labeled, "Father, strong but flawed. Improved model complete." He drank alone at night, studying its preserved chambers, wondering what surgical monstrosities the twins had perfected in their final mountain sanctuary before starvation or cave-in claimed them. Years later, during New Deal mine inspections, workers found the Adair's final laboratory 800 feet below Shaft 11. Surgical table carved from coal vein, walls papered with anatomical sketches charting perfect human proportions. 17 empty specimen shelves labeled for future harvests, no bodies, no tools. Just a final ledger page, dated March 2nd, 1924. Black hollow diseased beyond surgical intervention, relocating to healthier tissue, eerie. Tate retired in 1928, his health destroyed by black lung contracted during endless shaft searches. He died whispering about conjoined shadows moving through ventilation darkness. Black Hollow survived, though miners still spoke of hammering echoes during longwall shifts, blaming gas pockets or imagination. Consolidated Coal bulldozed the Adair cabin site,